Story 1. I used to fly for work, a lot. I have so many entitled people stories it stops surprising me to run into the behavior. This is one such story. Cast, me, myself and I equals me. EP equals entitled person. FA equals flight attendant being someone that used to fly a lot. I constantly was upgraded to business class, first class or simply just upgraded seats using miles. Since this was a connection for me, I arrived and boarded later than most of the plane. Soon as I walked into the plane, I saw someone was sitting in my seat since I had been upgraded. Now, if you fly enough, someone sitting in your seat is not an uncommon occurrence. Me, excuse me, I believe you are in my seat. EP does not even bother looking up at me, waves his hand dismissively at me and said let's just switch seats so I can sit beside my wife. Me, sure, what is your seat? EP, snickerdoodle. Now I do not remember exactly what seat number he said, but it was the last row of the airplane. Aisle seat, right by the bathroom. Yes, I have had to fly in those seats in the past. Remember, my assigned seat was in the first class, business class section. Now, I have switched seats with people innumerable times in my life without a second thought, even first class seats. The look of someone getting to unexpectedly ride first class is priceless, but the way this guy was behaving and what he was expecting, this was not one of those times. Me, no, I am just going to sit in my assigned seat. Now he finally looked at me. EP, well, I want to sit by my wife so I am not moving. Me, well, if you want to sit by your wife, I am sure whomever is sitting way back there would be more than happy to switch seats way up here so you can sit back there with your wife. He didn't like that at all, for what could he really say at that point without sounding like a jerk? He just stared at me. Me, now annoyed. Move EP, I am not moving. Ding darn right, I push the call button. FA, yes sir, how may I help? I hand her my ticket and say that he is sitting in my seat. She asks for his ticket, checks both tickets, sees his seat number and, in my mind at least, gave him a look of seriously. FA, sir, you need to sit in your assigned seat. EP, I want to sit beside my wife. Well, I wasn't missing a beat and parroted my original statement about me being sure whomever was sitting back there beside him would be more than happy to switch seats than sit up here. Boy oh boy, that obviously made him angry. FA looks at EP's wife and says, ma'am, would you like to switch seats so you can sit by your husband? EP's wife, no. FA continues in that all too familiar flight attendant voice that lets you know you have no choice. Well sir, you have to sit in your assigned seat, so please gather your things. What a sad and pathetic sight it was seeing this grown man act like a baby, gather his things and then sulk towards the back of the plane. Yes, his wife sat beside me that flight, and didn't join her husband in the back of the plane. No, we didn't talk to or look at each other even once, which was perfectly fine with me. Imagine dismissively expecting someone to give up their first class, business class seat to sit in the very last row of the airplane by the bathroom. Story 2. Well, quite a few of you asked for more travel stories. Here is another one. I used to fly for work, a lot. I have so many entitled people stories it stops surprising me to run into the behavior. This is one such story. Cast, me, myself and I equals me. EP equals entitled person. FA equals flight attendant. Every single person that has flown knows about the armrest war. Who gets it? When you need to claim it. How you have to keep it. But this particular EP engaged in a whole new armrest war I had never encountered before. Unfortunately for me, I had to change a flight last minute, which meant I ended up with a dreaded middle seat, for the flight was pretty well booked. To make it even worse, it was another connecting flight, which means I was boarding later than everyone else. As I walk towards my seat, I see a woman sitting in the aisle seat on my row. Now, if you travel enough, you also know about sitting beside people that need a little extra room. People come in all shapes and sizes, and some just don't fit in the ever-shrinking airline seats. As I go to sit down, she not only was sitting well into my seat, but she also had the armrest up. Awesome, a new armrest war I haven't had to deal with before. After squeezing in my seat, I went to put the armrest down. EP, what are you doing? Me, I am putting the armrest down. EP, no, you are not. I need the extra room. Me, well, I want the armrest down. I proceed to try and get the armrest down, but she was putting up a fight and was yelling-ish something at me that I cannot remember. To be honest, I wish I handled the situation a little better, but instead, I rammed it down as hard as I could, for I was not going to have to fly sitting the way I was. She let out a yelp and was fuming, muttering under her breath. Ding, she pushed the call button. FA pleasantly says, may I help you? EP, snickerdoodle. Now she didn't actually say snickerdoodle, I just don't remember all the rubbish that came out of her mouth, but when you are in shock about a situation, some of the exact details get more blurred. What I do remember is her comping about how rude I was putting the armrest down, how uncomfortable she was, so on and so forth. The flight attendant listens to the lady, looks at me, turns and walks away, obviously to try and figure out how to rectify the situation. Fine by me. If I get moved, any seat will be better than this one. If she gets moved, I will get an aisle seat. It seemed like 10 years went by as I sat squished in my seat when the FA comes walking back and says, "FA, sir, there has been a no-show in first class. Please gather your things and follow me." Me, stunned EP, stun me. I look over to the woman sitting beside me and say, "Miss, why don't you go ahead and take the first class seat?" I insist. "Just kidding." I jumped up so quickly, did my best to make it out of my row and happily made my way to my new seat. I never did make eye contact with that woman. I can only imagine the expression on her face. Well, at least she got her extra room. Story 3. I used to fly for work, a lot. I have so many entitled people stories it stopped surprising me to run into the behavior. This is one such story. Cast, me, myself and I equals me EP equals entitled person as can be expected. In a larger airport, I arrived to my connection gate after boarding already started. As I go through the slow death march into the plane, I arrive to my seat to see that the foot space of my seat is already packed solid way into the foot space. I asked the person sitting beside me if it was their stuff, to which they replied that they had no idea whose it was. Well, I certainly wasn't going to be sitting with such limited leg room on a multiple-hour flight, so I start removing all that stuff. I hear from several rows up, "Excuse me, what do you think you are doing?" Me, "Someone stuffed all their things in my foot space. Is this your stuff?" Now, I look where she is sitting and she has nothing in the foot space in front of her. This woman really expected someone else to be inconvenienced and made uncomfortable by her stuff during the long flight. Well, I obviously picked up the last of the items stuffed in my foot space. "EP, you put that back." She didn't scream it. She didn't yell it. She just assertively and expectedly told me to put her items back under the seat in front of me and then gave that stare. Me, "Lady, I am not going to fly with all your items jammed in front of me. I want my leg room." I walked up to her and she made it clear she wasn't going to take the items from me. So I pushed them in her arms, let go, said, "If you don't want to fly with all these things in front of you, what makes you think someone else does?" Turned and walked away. Did some of them fall on the ground? Yes, they did. Did I care? No, I didn't. Could I have been nicer about it? Maybe. As I sat down, I saw her picking up the item or two that dropped, stand up to realize there is no overhead space left and proceed to stuff them under the seat in front of her. While I realize that this falls somewhere between rude and entitled, I thought it fitting enough for this subreddit. Story 4. This was when I was 18. I'm 34 now, so 2004 to 2005. Think pre-iPhone. But cell phones like the Nokia 3310 exist, which I had one because my parents wanted to make sure I always could be contacted. I worked at bar chain restaurant for 6 months. Let's call it C. It was a completely new store. When we opened, we were the only building for 8 blocks except for the sister restaurant next door that was part of the same investment group as C. It was a decent upper middle class white neighborhood, so we'd get lots of people in the door. I was originally hired as to go, but I was trained up in almost everything in the restaurant, and I frequently filled shifts, and I got the most hours for it. It was the worst job I ever had, and still is. After getting shifted around to different homes, OGO greater than QA greater than host sometimes server, I eventually ended up in bus cleaning tables. They promised they would move me off of bus once we had bussers, but, as we'll find out later, that day never came. The main reason this happened is that we ran out of bussers. They tried hiring bussers at a rapid rate, but it didn't work. The average survival rate for a busser was 2 weeks, including training time. Eventually, our reputation of chewing out bussers made its rounds. No one would even show up for interviews for the job. At C, a pecking order had been established. At the top, you had the managers, then it was the servers, then it was the bar servers, restaurant servers, etc. Guess what was at the bottom? That's right, bussers. Anytime I spoke up about how people needed to pre-bus their tables, people scoffed and said I should just do my job. I explained how I could clear an entire restaurant by myself if everyone pre-bussed their tables 30 seconds per table versus 8 minutes per table. Deaf ears. So, I have to explain about why there's a huge time differential between a pre-bus table and a total bus table. If the servers took every plate off the table, even if the table was grody, I could wipe it into my bucket, clean up a few things, wipe off the seat, reset the center of the table, and move on to the next table. I'd be in and out in 30 seconds and on to the next table. However, if I had to total bus a table, I'd have to take all of the plates, organize everything on the tab. Time varied depending on the number of people at the table, 2 minutes for a 2-top, 4 to 5 minutes for a 4-top, etc. If a table had ordered lots of drinks, multiple fajitas, each fajita meal contained no less than 6 dishes, or had been particularly unsanitary about their eating practices, unruly kids usually, you could add up to 3 minutes per table. This also compounds that I had to go back to the kitchen and sort through all of the plates, cups, etc. Well, 2 months into my "we're going to move you off of busing once we find bussers, it's a busy Saturday night. I'm talking 1 hour wait at 6:30 p.m. Half the tables are currently dirty, and I'm working my ass off, but each table takes about 5 minutes because no one is pre-bussing tables. I'm told the priority is the restaurant, so I had to tell the bar waiters that they probably wouldn't be bussed at all because it would be so busy. They were not having that, and the on-shift AM assistant manager told me I should do my job, but I should still prioritize the restaurant, not the bar. Whatever. I'm constantly telling servers to pre-bus their tables, only to be ignored. It was a particularly bad night, so I asked if the dishwashers could help me out when I brought back my tabs instead of organizing everything myself. They were nice, so they agreed, and it was a decent system, cut out 2 to 3 minutes per table. It was still pretty hell, with lots of people wanting food. It still didn't help that I had to go back to the kitchen every time there was a full bus table. Enter Karen, queen of the bar server bitches. Remember that pecking order I mentioned? Yeah, she was the queen of the server order. She was one of the ones that constantly berated me for my job performance, despite the fact that I did more than almost anyone else in the restaurant. She made my last 2 months a living hell, constantly telling me I didn't do a good job, that she had to wait for me too long, etc. I constantly told the AMs and manager about the disrespect I received, and they said I should just man up. She never got a single write-up. One particularly busy Saturday night, Karen was a server in the bar side, which meant she wasn't in the priority. I told her that I couldn't bus her tables unless she pre-bussed them, and only if there weren't restaurant tables I needed to bus. She was constantly telling me I needed to bus her tables and I was lazy, despite the fact that I had lifted over 300 tabs that night. She wasn't the priority. She didn't pre-bus any of her tables, and she was always on the back dock smoking. Once that night a nice couple saw me working in the table behind them, and politely asked if they could talk to their server so they could take their order. She had left them alone for 15 minutes while she was smoking on the back dock and flirting with one of the prep cooks. She scoffed when I interrupted her flirting. "Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I'm sorry I interrupted your 6th flirting break today so you can do the thing you were hired to do." About 6:30 p.m. that night, the restaurant got flooded with people, 1-hour waits, and I had to push my ass to the limit. I was flipping tables, despite absolutely zero of the servers pre-bussing. However, since the restaurant was the priority, I couldn't get to her tables at all. Finally, we got a dip. I could finally get to her 3 tables, and all of them aren't pre-bussed. So, I have to do the full bussing for her tables, despite they have been vacant for almost 45 minutes. After the first table, she follows me back to the second table and tells me I need to hurry and I'm garbage at my job, and I'm making her lose money. I tell her to leave me alone and don't reprimand me in the front of the house. It was embarrassing, with bar patrons looking over their shoulder and I could see they honestly felt sorry for me. I was at the lowest point in my life at that point in time. I honestly felt like I was the worst human being in the world. Once she left, I stopped bussing for a second and sat down at the table for a second. I looked at the dirty half-full tab, and I got up. The table wasn't finished, and I left my dirty tab on the seat. I went to the back end to go. It wasn't active, and this was before widespread internet. We got maybe 15 orders per night, so the managers had relegated to-go duties to the QA that serviced the rest of the restaurant. It was easily accessible for them, but it was also vacant at that point in time. Call-in to-go was a relatively new and novel concept. I put down my headset, turned it off, pulled out a to-go pad, and wrote a full note noting how this restaurant is going to go down the toilet unless the managers get balls and reprimand the staff for treating bussers like crap. I then left, without telling anyone. I was called on my cell phone about 5 minutes into my drive home, and the AM told me, "Opus, you still have a shift." My response was, "No, I don't. I quit." Their response, "Opus, you still have a shift." Again, my response is, "No, I fucking don't need to be disrespected like I have. I quit." She had the gall to repeat herself, "Opus, you still have a shift." I hung up and turned off my phone. It turned out that I left just in time for the dinner rush. Sad as we closed at midnight, so, for those last 4 hours it was hell in a handbasket. I was told that the AM prevented anyone from going home until 2 a.m. because the restaurant was basically a trash basket by the end. Wait times at 10 p.m. were capped because they were well over 2 hours. Host told me later on that she had to turn away 40 families that night because everything went to hell. Some people just left while waiting for a table. Orders were getting misplaced. This information made it up to corporate, and they had to call in a fixer team to figure out what happened. They wanted to call me, but I wasn't going to talk to them. There was some restructuring in the business. The manager got shifted to another position in the company. The AM that called on staff was let go. Karen rode up, relegated to the shit shifts, and eventually left. I didn't return for 2 months, but not as an employee, but a customer. I was told all this by one of the remaining AMs, the one that actually treated me like a human being, and he gave me all of my tip shares, which was nice. The next best part of this, the day after I left my best friend found an ad that a huge game maker was looking for QAS. We applied that day, and the following week, I got interviewed and hired on the spot. He didn't make it. It was the beginning of my programming career. I advanced through that job, got over to automation programming, then got hired at other companies. Now, I'm a senior programmer for a sheriff's office with 14 years of programming experience.